Here we go. Okay. Welcome. You know what? It's week 7, everybody. It feels like week 27, but it's week 7. But we're more than halfway. We're more than halfway. So, and today we're going to talk about Orlando and performativity. So I've got lots of stuff, but I wondered, Stephen, if you wanted to jump in. Maybe.
I want to hear your questions though, Stacey, because I know it's your forte.
Okay.
I'm really fascinated to hear what you have to say. And I'll chime in if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to open my notes here. So we had a nice chat this morning with a few of us about performativity theory, and yeah, I'm a kind of a geeky, excited about it always. So don't be shy. If you didn't tune in at 9, that's totally fine, because that's before class. But if you want to talk about it, anybody who's here now, I'll hang around after it during the break, and then also I'm happy to get on with you. Okay, where to start? Stephen, I know you want to talk about the mirror. You want to say something about the mirror, or you might.
Yeah, just, thoughts about that, but yeah.
Yeah, well, so just hang out, folks, that we were having a previous discussion, but maybe this is helpful. Just give me the thumbs up if you think it is. So I think the mind twist about performativity theory is that you have to just let go of the idea that you possess an identity and a gender and an essential gender. So the whole thing, which seems deceptively simple because it's hard to hang on to those ideas when you walk around in the world, but performativity theory in terms of gender, which is what Butler's talking about, is flipping the kind of cause-effect relationship that we think we have with gender on its head. So rather than thinking about gender as something that you possess, that you come into the world having, and that you live into it, or you enact your gender because it's who you are and you just express it out into the world, right? She's just saying that gender, rather than being the cause of behavior, is actually the effect of how people react and behave towards you and with you. And so the classic example of a performative, which is shorthand for that, is saying something is doing something. So all of those things in language that we can say actually accomplish an act. Like the classic is getting married. Someone pronounces you married, and then guess what? You're married. But way before that, we make pronouncements about gender. Even before we are born, people want to know what gender we are, as if 2 genders exist. And then we start talking about human beings as if they possess that gender, and then we treat them in ways that conform to norms around gender. So we might treat someone we classify as male or a boy in a certain kind of rough and ready way, and we treat girls in a quite different way. And so the whole idea is that through those performances of scripts that we have around gender, we become that gender. Our idea of our gender is an effect of those encounters and those treatments. So the cool thing about Orlando is there's both the kind of linguistic performatives. So I'm alone, like saying that makes that so, or taking it away tries to make that so. Or my favorite is just the pronouncement of that name. I am Orlando. And seeing that, and then taking that whole thing apart, because who is Orlando? Orlando is all kinds of people, and all kinds of people in relation to all of the others in that performance across time, and across relationships. And that's really, I guess, what I wanted to say about the mirror. The really important thing about performativity as an idea is that it's not something that someone does by themselves. You have to, it's always a relational act, and it always has to have a witness. So sometimes that's just the one other that you're in relation with. And sex is a great example of that,
Yeah.
right? Because you are in relation with someone else in terms of your gender and your sexuality, and that's why those things are so separate but so tied up together. But also you are performative in relation to some kind of witness. And for me, the amazing, simple, beautiful thing about that performance is the mirror means that the audience is witness to the mutations and shifting around gender and identity. Right? So if you think about when babies are born, the witness or the kind of the institutionally sanctioned person who gets to say is a doctor. Or when you're married, whoever the officiant is, they're the witness, they're the performative, and you got to have other people to sort of see that happen. And even when you go to a wedding, you're asked to kind of assent to the union, right? You're asked if you object or if you support. And so all of those dynamics are just really beautifully unpacked in Orlando in terms of that mirror. It just sets the whole thing up as a kind of reflection of ourselves. Okay, that's me rambling a little bit. I don't know if you all want to jump in. I mean, I've got all kinds of things to say, but.
Dana, through the process, did you feel like you and Emma and Kate and Mary Helen were talking about these concepts as you were making it? Or is that something that maybe was fed by, was something that was on Emma and Kate's mind but didn't feed into the room?
Yeah, so that was 2012, and I suppose it was still at a time where, I mean, now we've been working together for so long that Mary Helen and I, as performers, are much more in this circle of discussion and in terms of the more academic side of the ideas that we're talking about. But to be honest, if I'm really honest with myself and I think about it, we did Orlando 3 different times, but in the first and it did change, and the video is the first iteration. That's the first time we performed it in 2012, but we did it again in 2013 and again in 2014. And by that time I was much more engaged in this kind of discussion about it. But in the creation of it, no, I don't think I understood anything. I was interested in Virginia Woolf. I was obsessed in the book. I reckon I've read the book 20 times. And I knew the book kind of inside out, and I read everything of Virginia Woolf, and I research. I read everything about her relationships and why she wrote Orlando. So all of my stuff was more around. I was very into Virginia Woolf, and yeah.
Which is interesting because the novel is actually kind of a precursor for Gender Trouble, because it's this beginning of that manifesto, and so maybe just through the guise of Woolf herself, you found that, without having to articulate it, because she does it in a kind of poetic way as opposed to an academic one.
I just feel like I was totally engaged with it in a bodily way, but not in a mind way. And that's been I think Orlando was the first show that the Rabble did where I know Emma knew exactly what she was doing and was completely her intention. But I know that we came out of doing Orlando and Emma kind of had this revelation of going, we're a feminist theatre company.
Yeah.
And that had not been up until then. And then we made Orlando and it was we make feminist work. That is who we are. And so then I started to engage more in the kind of I guess more like mind-based kind of ideas around that. But up until then, I was really just like, I'm an actor who works in my body. Yeah.
Which is kind of what happens to Orlando throughout the novel too. Sorry, Stacey, I keep
No,
cutting you
you
off.
go.
No, but because things just happen to their body and they have to kind of react to it. Like every time period they get thrown into, do you know, like there's a new gestural language that they have to learn and all of those things. Anyway, go on, Stacey.
I really loved um, I also was really into the progression of language.
Yeah.
So and they're all of the poems in Orlando are female poets. And so it starts with that kind of very clunky, Orlando starts trying to work out that, this is how to rhyme. And then they make that very like clunky Emily Dickinson poem about the frog and the bog. And it's like, oh. And then it progresses into I think it's Gertrude Stein in the Change, where Orlando's saying, study nature, I do, like and this kind of like development of how language kind of can, like a maturation of a way of using language. And then by the end, Orlando kind of speaks this very like kind of, I don't know, big text in terms of that development. Yeah. So I loved that part as well. I loved the progression and the idea of the progression of language. And I really engaged with like trying to find the right poems and the right words and the right things that would be the next progression. Yeah.
Because in the novel, it's the grass is green, the grass is green. It's very funny, like his first poem, and then at the end he writes this manifesto, but you never hear it in the novel.
Yeah,
it's amazing that you do in the show.
Hear that a woman wrote something that won a prize. Yeah.
Well, two things about that are really, really interesting and wonderful. One is, look, I think that on the one hand, I mean, Butler's sort of, I love that video because she's so relatable and you can understand her, but reading her is a challenge. But, she says, oh, look, theory has to be unusual language. So otherwise we won't pay attention to it. It can't be everyday language. And she's trying to write about something we don't have words for, really. But Donna, I love you saying that, I mean, you did know what you were doing. And really,
well, I knew what I was doing, but I knew it. I didn't know it at this, I didn't know the theory. That wasn't, Yeah.
But the theory is trying to give language to what the body knows. And so it's great when those things come together. It makes me think about, what was that, week 1 or 2, when that little writing about theory being a muscle. And it's just a way to be stronger in all of the choices that you want to make, like they're right, and you live in your body and you live in the world, and this is a theory about what happens in the world in a body. So it's just a really beautiful example of the power when those things come together. They become kind of supercharged almost. But it also, I love your story about, and that you point out about the progression of the writing, because the other really exciting thing, I think, about performativity is how it's sparked, in addition to some other kinds of ways of thinking, a real attention to writing as a performance, as a stage, and to use the writing as a performative. So at the end, that last manifesto, that the poem that we get to hear, the award-winning poem, it does the thing that it's talking about. Like the words actually do. And it's so beautiful because it's so well crafted in terms of the disintegration and then the coming together of the disparate parts of a self. And so it becomes this poetic embodiment in words, really, of the kind of progression and what's happened to that person over the course of that novel. So, and that's a whole other story. But if anybody wants to talk to me about performative writing, I'm like a total junkie about it. Yeah.
Me too. Yeah.
Well, and then you think about stuff like Maggie Nelson and Paul, what's his name, who wrote Testo Junkie, and all this writing that's really trying to do stuff with gender in a poetic way. Oh yeah, I could go all day on this. I won't bore all the
Pesto
rest of you.
Junkie. That sounds amazing.
Oh yeah. Oh my God, Stephen.
Okay, I'm gonna read it.
He's for you. What's his name? Paul Precardia. I'll have to think of how to spell his last name.
Cool.
Yeah, yeah. And he's just written this COVID thing that somebody posted the other day that's brilliant. Anyway, okay, totally getting off track here. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Maybe, oh, sorry, go Stacey.
Nope, it's your turn.
I was just going to say, maybe could you talk us through the process of making it?
Yeah.
Sure. I believe from memory, for that original production we had, it was made on $10,000. I can't remember getting paid for it. I don't think we did. And it was really like we took apart the book, kind of one chapter at a time. And we don't always work that way. And definitely like over time, as we've done more like devised work around perhaps more of an idea as opposed to like a firm IP in terms of a firm kind of set text. And also because we've like refined a devising process over time. But that was a real exploration in just, we would come in going, we're going to work on this chapter and make like offers really in what, and it was, and I remember there's this one chapter in Orlando where it's near the start of the book where Orlando is goes to Turkey to become an ambassador. He's like been dumped by the Queen or has left the Queen and goes to Turkey as an ambassador, and it's right before Orlando changes gender. And I do remember that, and I still have so many hilarious memories of trying to crack Turkey. And Mary Helen and me and Sid would come in with all different, like we do all this research at home about what people did in Turkey. And so I remember we improvised stuff, with hookers, and we decided, okay, it's going to be Turkish wrestling, and we looked up Turkish debt. We would do all these crazy things, and we just could not crack Turkey. And in the end, Turkey got cut, but in the final thing. But it was really, it was very much, and I think you can see it in the kind of final show. It was a real chapter by chapter, or the important chapters.
Yeah.
Of sort of Orlando. The first scene is Orlando ice skating, and then it's all just each chapter meeting Sasha, waking up and becoming a woman, all the different things, but very much like broken down to a sort of elemental thing.
Yeah,
and then
it's a very distilled version.
It's very distilled. And then I know that at some point Emma had the idea that's towards the end, like that it becomes a dream, and that we sort of revisit all of the things that we've met along the way, where those parts where I keep falling over in the water and finding myself with a cup of tea, and falling over the water and finding myself with Sasha's come back. Like that's very much a sort of dream sequence for me.
And that's actually a reference to the end of the novel when she's sort of waiting in the house and all the ghosts coming back, which is kind of, it's a really imaginative way of tackling something that's in the text but making it yours.
Yeah, but it's very directly the novel.
Yes, it is.
It's very, very directly just breaking down the novel. Yeah.
Can you be even more specific there in terms of chapter by chapter. So you came in and you were working on a chapter, and how did you work with text in relation to breaking down the novel and
Well,
distilling
it's really like on the floor. So it's really knowing the text, knowing the parameters of knowing what coming in with, knowing the text and trying images on the floor. So really just making offers.
Would you get a parameter like, for example, in this moment, we're going to look at Orlando sitting under the oak tree, writing their poem.
No.
Like, would you get things like that, or what would kind of get you to create the image other than the chapter broadly?
At that stage, I think we worked pretty broadly.
Okay.
To start with, and it was like very much like a free for all. And in terms of we're looking at this chapter, and maybe it would be as kind of maybe the parameters would be something like, okay, Orlando, in this scene, Orlando is going to meet Sasha.
Yeah.
But we tried that, we tried everything, or just tried making offers of it was very open. I think we would be more refined about it now, because we all have a better understanding of like making better parameters for ourselves. But at that time, I don't think we knew. We just like tried constantly. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And what would you do now in terms of better parameters? Like, can you think of like the meeting Sasha example?
I think that we'd probably, I think just our skills as performers have gotten better in terms of just not being so random in knowing, like intuitively knowing offers that work. Whereas at the time, I was not, I did not know what, I had very little, I'm not one to censor myself. So I'm like very, and perhaps that's why I had maintained a relationship in working with Kate and Emma, is that I might not know exactly what to say, but I'll find something to say. Like I'll say a lot, but at that time I think, whereas now I feel like I know at least, like I've narrowed that a lot in knowing where the ballpark of where we need to be, what I need to offer, what it has to be in relation to the whole work. But at the time, no idea. Yeah. Random. Trial and error.
That makes sense.
Makes
sense. Right.
Does anyone have any questions from the group?
But can I also, like, on that, I guess I want to say, no, not many, I don't know any other courses, and certainly I did like 3 years of drama school that teach this in terms of devising work. So I even think what you know now, you would have better skills than me in terms of going into Orlando and going, oh, what does the work need and what is it about, and being able to unpack some of that. I did not, it's not this kind of training is not common. It wasn't how I learned to be an actor. And so I didn't have the skills at that time to read what the full work was trying to do. And now that's all I think about. But yeah.
I can relate to that too.
I wish I had kind of had someone instill that in me, but I didn't. I had to learn it through making a lot of really embarrassing offers. Yeah. And people thought, no.
How was it for you, Stephen?
Like adapting from like traditional methodologies. It was really hard, but because you get given a very like a framework that is so heteronormative that it's very difficult to break out. But whereas when you get into devising processes, you can play with performativity and you can explore theory and you can explore image in a way that you can't when all you're thinking about is like given circumstances and objectives, which of course are in those things too, but they're not the only thing essential to making theatre, which is why it's cool that, you as a group are getting information about how to devise, because it's not something that's taught readily in major institutions. Yeah.
There's some questions in the chat that I'm just going to answer.
Mm-hmm.
So this first one is from Sarah and was about the sound design. So Emma, who is the director, is an incredible musician. Like, she's just genius on all fronts. So she actually now, that was the first show that she did the sound design for. And now, as we're working, she kind of offers sounds into the mix while she's directing. So she'll have her laptop with whatever, I don't know whatever she uses. And so it really is integrated. And a lot of the sounds in the Orlando sound design, that was the first one that she did. She made a lot of them just at home with the microphone with her mouth. So all that, that,
Yeah.
that's Emma in the microphone going,
oh my God.
Wow.
and just repeating it. She didn't have the same tools that she does now. And so literally that's how she did it. And in the end, when I'm doing that monologue and you hear the piano, that's Emma playing live. Yeah. She's playing a piano on the side of the stage. Yeah. So that became a kind of performance. In that first iteration where she played live, it was a kind of feeling thing between me and her where we were like riffing rhythms off each other a bit. But then we did do it for the Brisbane Festival and Dark Mofo, and we had to record that, and I had to really be precise about my delivery. But I loved that first when we could just be like, oh yeah, and you do that there and I'll do that there, because I'm a musician as well. So it was really good.
It's so amazing. It's such a because Barry Kosky used to do that, a very famous Australian director. He used to always play live with the performance, and I love that Emma's like this like miniature feminist Barry Kosky. It's quite amazing.
We decided to perform in the water. I think it was Kate who does the set design and the costume design. I think it was an intuitive decision that then Kate and Emma talk about design for a long time, but it's often like the original idea doesn't necessarily mean anything or come from anywhere. It is often just an immersion in research in the text, and then an intuitive, we're going to do it in water. And I think that started to stick, and the idea of it being white because of, we knew it was great for the start in terms of it being able to appear like ice, but then it had all of those metaphors of milk and and being on the white as well, we could project onto it, and we knew we wanted that projection of the universe, that was really important, this idea of something big. And I also think it was just when an actor, Kate is a master in terms of directing, and I think this is really interesting it's not just a design decision, it's a directing decision too, in that when an actor has a physical obstacle that they don't have it's no acting required, it is a physical, actual obstacle, that you have to negotiate. It takes all of the sort of, it's interesting. It's interesting to watch actors, especially an actor like Mary Helen in a huge queen outfit, like fall into the water and negotiate how she's going to get up. There is no acting required in her being like, oh, you know, that's all just like, oh God, this is awful and hard. And
we do that too.
There's a lot. We often, the rabble uses it all the time in terms of physical, like actual physical obstacles. Yeah. The role of the director, how did they scaffold? So May is asking, the role of the director, how did they scaffold or create an environment to explore? What did they do throughout the process of this? And what was their devising style? So, well, I don't know. I guess what I would say is that the style is like, I think Emma really led Orlando in terms of how, like, being kind of directing it in terms of the ideas and knowing what she wanted and knowing kind of setting the ballpark. But what Emma's really great at is knowing the ballpark, but not designating what an actor should do. Exactly. So she never, ever, she always lets it come from the actor, and she sort of starts to piece what she likes together. But I don't know that she's ever prescribed to me anything like, you need to say this here and do that like that. It is, she knows the ballpark, and then as actors, we're feeding ideas kind of into that ballpark in terms of on the floor offers. And then she's kind of watching very carefully for and picking and choosing things that to keep and throw away. But it is a long process of refining, developing certain ideas, what to throw away. And again, as a company, we're better at it now. And at the time, it was just a lot of like on the floor work. And Emma rarely speaks in rehearsal. So we rarely come into rehearsal and talk about what we're going to do. It's literally like warm up and start. So as an actor, I'm used to it now, but definitely at that time as an actor, at the start, I can feel very in the dark. I don't know what the parameters are. I don't necessarily know what she wants. I'm really just offering to the scene ahead of me, to the task. And I'm not trying to think about big picture or what we're going for, because it's so early. It might be just a simple, so Emma sets very simple tasks to start with, which are like, make a physical image of this. And that might progress into an improvisation, using those physical images towards the scene where Orlando's skating on the ice. But it's very progressed and it's very small in terms of it broken down, as opposed to going for a massive chunk. It's like a small scene. And there's very little chat about what it means or anything like that. Was it difficult to move in the water when you brought it in? Yeah, it was really difficult. And when we did it at Dark Mofo in Tasmania, it was also very, very cold. I did cold water training to do it in Tasmania. So, and I reckon, I think in tech rehearsal in Tasmania, I was pretty close to hypothermia because we'd spent so long in the water. But I had done cold water training, so I would go down to the beach and like force myself to be in the water, in winter for like 8 minutes straight and stuff. And was great. Like, I love that shit. Bring that shit on and I will do it. Yeah. But that's just me. But how do you, oh, hang on, sorry. How do you, so Samuel is asking, how do you move past the idea that you have to get a piece? I struggled with the idea of getting it. Yeah. So I think, Sam, I reckon that's a little bit like I was saying just before, that sometimes I think a director probably has to have more of a sense of getting the piece, in terms of knowing, as I said, like, I think Emma knows the ballpark. I don't think she knows the piece. She doesn't know exactly the piece because she doesn't know what the actors are going to offer. And sometimes even the structure of Orlando revealed itself after rehearsals started, not at the beginning. And I think that's a big thing about devised work. There is like a jumping off a pier sort of feeling about it, of like, you have to start to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, of I don't know. I know the theory of performativity, and I want to make a piece about it. And I know that we're going to use the source material of Orion, for example, but then it's about, I think, possibly going into breaking it off in smaller chunks and trying to start to find a line of interest, as opposed to the thing that I've really learned in the Rabble is envisioning something in your head, which I think a lot of directors do. I can see it. It's going to be amazing. And you're going to do this and you're going to do that. It actually doesn't translate on stage. So yeah, there's a piece last year even that had this great potential in they used tomato soup, and it was a great idea, and it was great, but they had never rehearsed with it. They had only ever imagined what they might do with the tomato soup when they actually had the tomato soup. And up until that point, they had mimed the tomato soup. And that is something in the Rabble that we would never do. Like, it's like working with the water. It's like always finding, like, having a go with the real thing and finding the potential of something. And you can only, and it's sort of a metaphor in that you can only sort of find the potential of something until you see it on stage and try it. And it's not just for like working with liquids or something disgusting. It's actually for anything. There is, you can't know how something will work on stage in your mind. So that's what I've learned. And so I will never argue with Emma about like, I don't reckon. My character wouldn't do that. Or I don't think that sounds like a good idea, because I know her answer. She'll just be like, try it, do it.
Yeah.
And I'll almost always be like, so I just don't, I would never say that. I'll try anything. Yeah.
And it also brings us back to, once you make a piece and then the audience come to it, we look, I don't care if it's a ham sandwich or a piece of theater or a book called Orlando. There is no getting it. It's like whatever comes to you out of it is going to, that's what it is. And so letting go of the idea that like there's a meaning and an intention, and I'm gonna beam that from my mind into Donna's mind, and then Donna's gonna beam it out to an audience, and everyone's gonna leave thinking they know what that performance is about.
Yeah.
It's a fool's journey, really. So what the cool thing about devised work, at least from my point of view, is it's sort of built on the foundation of letting that go, which means that the works just keep giving and giving and giving. So I reckon all these pieces that you've watched, and you'll go back and watch them because you have to write about them, and you'll go back a couple of years later and you'll see them again. And Donna's done this piece a few times, and Stephen's revisited work. It always means something different because there's so much richness there that you can't hold it all in one viewing. It's the gift that keeps on giving, whatever that like silly kind of phrase is. It really is. So that's the cool thing. So we really could just give ourselves permission to stop trying to get shit. Like, we don't have to do it anymore. You've already done your VCE exam, so you don't ever have to think about that again, like ever.
Well,
like,
and you never have to think
it.
you never have to think like that again. Like, it's over. Like, goodbye.
You can think better, and you can think more deeply and complexly. Those are different things, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, embrace complexity, embrace, as I think Dana said, being uncomfortable with an idea, or I don't know, or with a scenario. It's great. Don't be scared.
Yeah, and so in the next thing because the next one's from Maggie talking about trial and error, how do you choose what worked? And was it the director that made that decision? Yes, most of the time it is. Or was it amongst performers? I'm always cataloging things for myself that I think, maybe I'll offer that again. Was it the director, or was it amongst, did differing ideas of what worked challenge you?
Sorry, I'll clarify on that.
Yeah.
So like if say like amongst all of you as a company, like, did you have differing, obviously you all read the text and all had this kind of, that was the basis of the work, but did you all, like, when improvising, some of you might like some offers and some of you might not. How do you make like a collaborative decision? Like, obviously the directors kind of makes that, but it's hard to describe. But like, was there any confrontational, like, problem solving amongst the trial and area, if that makes sense? Like, just differing ideas.
I think there is. For me, I think you do have to trust the outside eye. You have to trust the person who is watching it. And sometimes, and I think I've talked about this a little bit before, but sometimes the actor, and there is a saying about this, Stephen, you might know it, I can't remember it, but it's like sometimes the actor can really feel in the moment that they are like, I am feeling this, and I am emotional, and this is like, I am in it, and this is gold what I'm doing, and yet it is cold to the audience.
Absolutely.
And I don't always know why that is. It's
to do with, like, because of that, like, immense feeling internally, there's no share, like, you're not sharing it with the audience. Like, I feel like that's sometimes what happens as well, like when people are like so in their own emotional state as performers.
Yeah. It's definitely happened to me before where I thought I'm offering gold and Emma's gone, no. And for me, it's just a process of always thinking, like, taking the ego out of my own work and always thinking about the whole, and you just move on. You move on and you try something else. Yeah.
For sure, that's awesome. That kind of describes also, like, obviously when you're devising, you kind of just have to get out of your head from hearing what you guys talk. You just don't be scared. Just make offers and just, like, be brave and just do it.
Don't try and calculate it and make something you think is good, because that's going to be the death of the process.
And especially at the start, when you really are about just experimenting and you don't have the stuff yet, so you might think, okay, I've got this, I want to create an image of, I don't know, where I'm hunting something with a bow and arrow in, Orion or whatever. And of course you don't have the bow and arrow and you don't have all those things, but it's about creating it as best as you can. And if you want to do it with a pen, or you want to do it with, I don't know, your curtain, that's fine. In the end, by the time you get to performance, all of those things will be solved. but it's also the risk, I think, in terms of the actor constantly offering, is that you're not trying to jump back into your head and explain yourself on the way. So if I'm in a rehearsal that Emma is directing and I've just made this offer like this, I'm not going to go, oh, by the way, the pen is a gun. You know, like, you can talk about that later if she goes, what was that? It worked, but I don't know what it was. So it's trying to also stay within the body and keep just making offers with your body and what you have. Sometimes I do like have little, like, will collect for myself little ideas of text that I might want to throw it, like, pepper in if it's towards a specific scene. But sometimes also I have an impulse in rehearsal to speak, but I don't know what the text or the content of the text would be. So I'll go instead for something like rhythm or tempo or duration, or just making a sound that feels like it might that's in the ballpark of tone. That's hard to describe, but I guess what I'm trying to say is, in the beginning, you're not aiming. In the beginning, it's about feeling your way out in terms of, don't focus too far ahead on that final kind of end point. The director will start to create that from little things that you've offered along the way. In terms of, hang on, did the sound design influence acting, or was acting from the floor already decided, devised before sound was created?
Dana, Stacey's got her hand.
Sorry.
Hey, we're up. We're past our time to start with Jason. So I've collected they're both at least a couple of questions on actors and directors. So I've got those. So I will send them to Steve and Adana. And can you pick these back up in the toots for acting and directing? I've got them here, so we won't lose them. I've copied them out of the chat. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's Seb's question, and then the question about the sound. So yeah.
Yeah.
I've got them. I'll give them to you, so we won't lose them out of the chat here.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. Thank you all for asking these great questions. They're really great. And if you have more questions, don't be shy about throwing them at Donna or Stephen. Yeah.
And please, everybody, pick Stacey's brain about performativity, because it's such an interesting topic.
Yeah.
And she's an expert on it, and like, I think it would give you so much room for these next performances. I hope that you don't mind me saying that, Stacey. I just think you're so it's wonderful.
Yeah. And it's not meant to get in your way, but it really does help you kind of think about what the ballpark might be, and then you get down to your business about making your work. But you can keep that in the ether. And I'm happy to answer questions in terms of any of the theoretical stuff, because you're going to get down to choosing one of our performances and trying to write through those ideas about the performance to see what happens there. So I want to start talking to people about that. Those are due in a couple of weeks. So yeah. Okay, thank you. That's so great. Thank you for sharing everything you did today, both of you. And we're going to talk about lighting with Jason. So that's exciting as well. Yeah. So stick around, folks, and then we'll have a break, and then we'll come back for our toots. Yeah. Okay.